Welcome. What I'm going to spend the next little bit of time talking about is one of the major new initiatives in the UK, which is now renamed as Our Future Health, but it was originally set up as something called the Accelerating Detection of Disease, part of the Industrial Strategy Challenge Fund. And this is a new resource that's been established, really looking at the future around early detection research and how can we really tackle some of the outstanding problems that are in the field there. So to start with, I thought it would be useful just to give a bit of background and context to this. And really, one of the problems that we have is how do we tackle this growing challenge around treating late-stage chronic disease? So we do know that there are lots of interventions and lots of processes that are used to tackle late-stage chronic disease, but it's remained a problem across society. So whether that's in the later stages of being able to diagnose cancers, whether it's the use of diagnostics in dementias, we tend to pick up people at a very late stage of disease. So we tend to pick them up at a point where they're being heavily reliant on treatment and we're not really thinking very much about prevention. And really where we're going to is around the sort of concept of risk-based precision public health, which is, how do we really target those interventions? How do we really target the individuals? How do we really target the programs to those people who are going to benefit the most? And we know that when you start to think about the common chronic diseases of later life, that it is a sort of combination of the environment, the genetic factors, the behavioral, social interactions, and all of those things that come together ultimately define your risk of future diseases. And if you start to think about, where is the world going and where's healthcare going, we know that digital technologies are really changing the shape of healthcare today. There's a whole array of preventative, predictive, personalized therapies, interventions, treatments, and diagnostics, which are starting to come to fruition, really transforming, thinking through the things like artificial intelligence, machine learning, transforming the way that we think about diseases, we think about diagnostics, we think about treatments. And really, if we start to think about how can we harness all of those things, we can look for sort of three areas. One is using sort of earlier detection. So using both the combination of data and the combination of technologies, which really starts to identify new signals, detecting diseases much earlier than is possible today. The other is around prediction. So not only is it around, important to be able to detect people, but it's also important to be able to predict with high accuracy those who are at highest risk of disease. It's key to be able to intervene before disease starts in some people, those people who are most likely to go on. For example, if you think of dementias as a prime example here, you don't want to be detecting people early in their dementia process. You'd like to predict people and potentially intervene with people before they go on to get the first sort of signs and clinical symptoms. And ultimately, if you can either detect or predict people who are likely to go on to get disease better, what will be key is then what is the intervention? What's the tool, the treatment, the technology, the things that you will do with those individuals who you've detected earlier, so that ultimately you move to the space of being able to come up with better outcomes and better longer term prognosis for those people who will ultimately go on to be diagnosed with those conditions. And that has a benefit not only for the individual, but also for the healthcare system as well. And so what are we going to do? And what is Our Future Health going to do? Well, the proposal and the plan is that we're going to be delivering this world-leading resource around early detection and prevention research. Looking back a few years ago when the life sciences strategy was first being launched, capitalizing on the things that the UK is really great at is capitalizing on the UK population-based cohort studies. There's a huge track record in this country of being able to deliver large-scale longitudinal studies, dating all the way back into the sort of end of the 1940s, early 1950s, with the birth cohorts, with the British Doctor study, really through to the very recent sort of examples from UK Biobank, ALSPAC, Million Women study, and unique resources like GEL and the Genomics consortia that have come together around COVID, really sort of outlines the sort of strengths that the UK base has in delivering these large-scale longitudinal studies. If you couple the ability to deliver population-based health studies with the unique data resource that the NHS gives us, this truly is a globally unique offering of being able to study people from cradle to grave, being able to follow people through primary care, secondary care, through all of the imaging they have done, through some of the major registries, be those cancer, cardiovascular registries at the national level, and really joining those two things together to think about the ability to deliver a longitudinal study, longitudinal cohort studies, the ability to capture and capitalize on the data, and think about what that gives you for the ability to follow people over time, particularly if you can start to build in different data linkages, is really what sets us apart as a unique opportunity to do this. If you then start to think about how would you deliver and prepare and deliver this program, really what we left with is the collaboration. And what the life sciences strategy laid out is that really there are only some challenges which can only ever be delivered in a true collaborative way, working together between the charities, between academia, with the NHS, and with the life sciences industry. And ultimately, if you bring all of those people together, you bring together the data and you bring together this population health focus and research approach, you will bring together the ability to have a capability for discovering and developing new medicines, new diagnostics, new medical technology capabilities, to really address that problem that I outlined a few minutes ago of having new ways of developing and discovering ways of which we enhance the discovery, enhance the earlier interventions for people who may go on to develop chronic diseases. So the cohort, or the program itself, is relatively easy to describe on a page. It's actually incredibly complicated to deliver as a program, but what Our Future Health is going to do is recruit a 5 million person prospective cohort, which is broadly representative of the UK population. The focus here is diversity, scale, and the opportunity to follow people in the longer term. So we are all trying to recruit 5 million people. We're trying to recruit 5 million people who are adults, so over the age of 18, and represent the diversity of the UK population. That diversity isn't just the diversity by ethnicity, it's the diversity by age, by sex, by geographic location. It's also the diversity by socio-demographics. So understanding really a cohort of people, a platform, a research platform of people who really cover that UK population base. At recruitment into the program, what we'll do is take obviously consent and consent people to join the study, but we'll also be collecting a biological sample from them and collecting some health data from them. And that health data would be through a questionnaire. And that questionnaire will really be starting to ask some of the details which you just can't get from any of the record linkage, whether it's through the healthcare data or through other types of data set that we might link to over time. That biological sample that we take, we'll do a couple of things with. We'll extract the DNA from it and run a SNP-based analysis on everyone. That SNP-based analysis will allow us to be able to calculate things like polygenic risk scores, but also give us insights onto pharmacogenomics as well. The samples that are residual to the extract from the DNA will then be stored into a biorepository. So we'll create a biobank of samples which will be able to be accessed for future applications. That can be to discover, to test newly diagnosed tests, to look at samples over time. Obviously a huge potential of creating such a biorepository with all of the materials that we'll be able to collect from people. As well as recruitment, we'll be taking consent, which will link their NHS records and allow us to do connections into the various parts of the NHS which have automated data collection. We'll also be seeking ability to go back and add in different data sources in the future. So whilst we'll start with the simplest case of linking into NHS data, we also see the value of being able to join together the data from a lot of other different sources, such as the census, such as data on educational achievement and other administrative data sets, which is held in the government sort of space. But then in the future as well, by potentially being able to join other external data sets, be those fitness data, other tracking data, other information about individuals which may be passively collected by them through their interactions with technology, but which could be hugely beneficial to indicate early changes or diagnostic indicators of early disease. The other areas where we'll take consent at baseline are that we can obtain repeated samples from people, so that a key aspect of this is not just recruiting someone, but being able to track samples, being able to track the individual over time through repeated samples. We clearly would want to expand the data collection, and I'll come up and talk a little bit about the sort of digital side of the platform that we're trying to build here. But ultimately, we do want to consent repeated, expanded data collection to collect extra biological samples and follow people over time as much as practically possible. Uniquely, or almost uniquely for this sort of study, we want to be able to give people some health-related feedback. So whether that's giving them access to some of the information we collect, whether it's giving them access to the sort of polygenic genetic risks in a context for certain diseases. Ultimately, we want to be able to give that back to people, and we'll gain consent at baseline so that we can go back and offer to share that in the future. And finally, one of the most valuable aspects of the resource is the ability to invite people back to take part in future clinical studies. And that sort of is going to be potentially very simple, just on the basis of some of the obvious variables that we would measure about people, but also it could be linked to sort of risk profiling, so that we invite people who are at high risk of certain diseases who might want to take part in behavior change studies or other interventions, or test out the sort of new technologies and diagnostics that companies, academics, clinicians might be interested in developing. So that's the study on the page, and as I say, the plan to get us towards this really unique resource of a 5 million population cohort representative of the UK. And I sort of alluded to this a little bit so far, but the ability to deliver this is massively enabled by the system that's supporting digital and data innovation in the UK today. So whether that's the NHS data, whether it's the various aspects of commitments that sit within the NHS long-term plan around digital transformation, innovative diagnostics and care delivery, whether it's through the values that are, or the opportunities that are being created through the health data partnerships that are out there. I think many of you will be aware of the NHSX Centre for Improving Data Collaboration, really about sort of harnessing the opportunities provided by the routine data that the NHS collects. And ultimately by the sort of pretty world-leading innovation and infrastructures that are out there and expertise in this country that we have to partner with really closely to ensure that we maximize the opportunities this program can provide to us. That could be the AI labs, the pathology and digital radiology centres, the work that health data research is doing both centrally but also through the digital innovation hubs. Huge potential to sort of join a lot of these initiatives into the program so that we capitalize on all of the great work that those teams are doing and bring to bear into what we're trying to deliver the expertise, the insights and the ability to drive even greater opportunities from the data and the landscape that we have in the UK. And as I sort of alluded to, because this is part of the Industrial Strategy Challenge Fund, this does look to bring together industry, NHS researchers so that people can access data, develop new technologies and tackle key research questions together in a collaborative way. So what we've done over the past year, we started this program. I joined this program almost a year ago, so at the Easter 2020, just in the middle of the sort of outbreak of the first wave of COVID. But we've done quite a lot of work and planning over the previous sort of 10 to 11 months now, really thinking about what's the public engagement involvement. How do we deliver a program that's acceptable and will help us achieve the objectives that we're aiming for, getting this diverse group. So a huge sort of outreach and engagement, looking particularly around inclusion of people who are not often represented in research, whether that's the Black and ethnic minorities, the differences in regions, differences with people with low incomes or resources. So we've had over 100 people involved in focus groups, co-designs, interviews, really helping us on the protocol, on the public-facing materials, the information sheet, consent form, public-facing videos, materials, on some interviews with stakeholders from existing cohort studies, working with some of the leading scientists who have been involved in that, as well as working through the NHS and the people who will ultimately help us do a lot of the recruitment to make sure that what we design is easy to implement and has minimal impact for the the routine care of the population. We're planning now to go to the next level in the public involvement engagement. We've got multiple activities ongoing around creating diversity inclusion advisory groups and a public advisory group. Ultimately, that'll translate into a community outreach and networking program once we start to go live with recruitment, and a program of ongoing qualitative and quantitative research to continually learn and evolve our plans to maximize people's participation and ensure that what we're delivering is really hitting the needs of those people who want to engage and be recruited into this research study in time. The other important thing just to mention around the program is just how are we going to recruit 5 million people? And obviously that's a huge target to sort of aim towards and requires not that far off 1 in 10 of the population, eligible part of the adult population, to be recruited. So a significant challenge. More so when you start to think about the need to collect biological material, you need to maximize the opportunity to participate. You need to minimize the friction on the participant for participating, so that ultimately you hopefully get the highest participation rates you can. So really we've split this into 2 sort of areas of how we will think about recruitment. There are participants who would be recruited through their routine interactions with the NHS. And as you can see on the left-hand side, there are a number of sort of routine interactions that members of the public have with the NHS, whether it's through health check, which is a 5-yearly health screen, whether it's through blood donors who go along to do blood donation, whether it's through primary care and people who will routinely get blood tests done, similarly in secondary care. If we can tap into those areas where people are already going and having routine interactions which involve drawing blood for other purposes, the ability to recruit people there, take an extra sample of blood, minimize participant burden, capture a biological sample in parallel, it'll optimize how we think about delivery and hopefully maximize the ability to recruit people in those scenarios. Alternatively, and sort of separately, there are direct invitational approaches, whether those people are existing research participants, whether they're being invited to join because of their connection to a research study or a research resource, whether they're being invited because they're just a member of the public and we've identified them through the NHS records or through other surveys and records that are out there. This requires a bit more active participation, that people are not necessarily already engaging through the NHS and wouldn't necessarily be attending an appointment where we could use that appointment as their recruitment visit. But there are opportunities here to think through how we do home sampling, where we could potentially just collect a saliva sample, which would still give us enough information around DNA, but obviously wouldn't give us the valuable information and insights you would gain from having blood sampling. But we could invite and think about what pop-up clinics, what shopfront clinics, mobile clinics, those sorts of areas where actually, if we tailor them to the communities and populations we're recruiting from, we might well be able to maximize the opportunities and potentials for people to participate. So we have a diverse and ultimately what will be an inclusive approach to recruitment, really focusing on the experience of the potential participants, minimizing that burden and maximizing the opportunity to participate with minimum friction. And as I sort of said a few moments ago, to deliver a study on this scale means that we do need a very, very broad and inclusive set of tools which allow us to recruit, retain, and engage with people over time. So the primary approach to recruitment is that we're going to take one which is a digital first approach. Now, digital here is not purely apps or things on phones or iPads. It's not, it is those, but it is also things including mobile first websites, simple accessible platforms to allow people in, and potentially in the future using some of the more modern technologies around, maybe other technologies like SMS messaging, like some of the voice recognition potentials, to allow the recruitment of people from all ranges of communities, particularly recognizing the digital divide doesn't always mean that everybody has access to high quality digital tools. But for the large part of the cohort, what we are building and have spent a large part of the past few months now working towards is a sort of core backbone of a digital platform. That platform is going to be a sort of open and connectable, modular sort of approach. It'll have the sort of things that we need, such as consent models, governance, auditability, audit trails. We'll be able to bring into that the sort of modules that we need from the participant side. So consent, consent management, participant information, questionnaire, data linkages. We'll also develop the platform so that we can push out to the participants the sort of news, engagement, requests and features that will keep them engaged. And there'll be a whole range of very technical integrations that we need to do with the lab handling, the sample handling, all of the data that will come from any of the trackers, devices, other data sets, other data integrations that we need to do, as well as sort of maintaining the sort of research environment so that researchers, as they come along to access the resource, will be able to come into the environment to access the data and to do the sorts of research and have the tooling that will enable them to do the research that they want to do. So we'll be founded on things around open standards. We'll be building on what many, many others have done before to really make this an open environment and to make one which is the most accessible and has the ability to really bring people to the data and allow that sort of research ability, the research abilities that people need. But we'll be very cautious about the sort of privacy, the transparency, the ethical standards we need to adopt. Clearly bringing together 5 million people and all of the sorts of data that I've alluded to and described bring huge security risks with it. So it's something we take incredibly seriously, and we're working closely with the National Cyber Security Centre and others on making sure that this platform really is fit for purpose, really does enable research, really does protect the security and privacy of the individuals, and allows us to keep that engagement and dialogue with participants over time to maintain this sort of connectivity to them. I sort of mentioned this already, but just to refresh and highlight, the program itself has been now named one of the key components of the National Genomics Strategy. It was called out in particular in the document produced by the Department of Health towards the end of last year. What we are doing is we're designing a custom chip which would contain the latest discoveries around the SNPs which contribute to polygenic risk scores. So it's going to try to bring the latest thinking at the point at which we need to build this process, or to build this chip for the process, so that we bring in all of the latest knowledge and expertise around what SNPs contribute to polygenic risks of chronic diseases. We are planning to analyse DNA very shortly after recruitment and calculate their polygenic risk scores. We'll scale that up shortly after we start scaling up recruitment. Those scores will automatically appear in the database, so they'll go back in with the participant data. They'll be accessible to researchers. And we'll also be ensuring that participants are given the option of being able to get their own personalised risk assessments based not only on, but incorporating their polygenic risk scores. And ultimately, hopefully, the vision is that by doing this and by making this data available and by being a key part of the sort of genomic landscape in the UK, this will ultimately provide a resource which allows the sort of generation of information to contribute towards decisions on when, how, if polygenic scores should be implemented within the NHS, and particularly for being able to compare and contrast different diseases, different age groups, and different scales at which you can implement these types of research findings. So coming towards the end, where are we today? I sort of mentioned that we started this program back in April. We started in earnest back in April when I joined, and we started to recruit and build the team. Very, very shortly, and maybe even by the time this video comes out, we'll have all of the necessary approvals in place and start piloting in multiple UK locations, really testing the process around recruitment, consent, data collection and sampling. We've spent a lot of the time doing the operational planning so far. I'll show you a bit in the next slide, I think, the sort of timelines that we're working to. But where we need to get to very, very soon is to be able to show the operational feasibility, to understand the different routes by which we can collect and invite participants and collect the material and data from them. and really understand how we can go from where we are today to the scaling that we need to get to the 5 million overall. So the core elements of the process are really the identification invitation, making sure that people follow and conform the informed consent process, collecting the participant data and the health participant data, and collecting biological material to really look at the recruitment diversity, inclusivity there, ensuring that we're delivering a really brilliant experience for the participants, that they want to take part and they understand what's being asked of them through the information process, understanding the collection and all of the other operational details. So I say hopefully by the beginning of April, we'll be in a very good place to be starting this. We hope to run these sort of operational pilots during the course of the next few months with a view that hopefully by the end of the year, we'll be in a position to start really scaling recruitment to go towards the sort of overarching target of getting to 5 million people in the next 4 to 5 years. So where are we? And just the sort of very high level view of the timeline, you know, a lot of, as you can sense from what I've been talking about over the past sort of 25 minutes or so, has been around design and implementation and establishing what we needed to get this program really off the ground. Huge amount of work on getting the team recruited. And, you know, I'm really proud that we've got a really brilliant team now coming together to deliver this program. A lot around the operational design of how to do recruitment, how do you do the logistics, how do you make this happen. Digital team have done a brilliant job of bringing all of this together into a sort of first iteration MVP platform ready to start to go and recruit people. A never-ending program of public involvement and engagement that absolutely critical and central to the program is making sure that we listen, respond and adapt to the public's views of what we're trying to achieve. That's going to be critical to success. And directly linked to that, the brand communications. As I mentioned at the very beginning, this used to be called the Accelerating Detection of Disease Challenge. That was not a name that ever landed well with the public. We spent a lot of effort over the past over the past 6 to 8 months now, really going through the brand, coming up with what is it that's going to resonate? How do we communicate what we're trying to do? How do we create an image that people feel connected to? And you see some of that through the material of the slides and the images you've seen today, but a lot more of that is now starting to come together on the website, on the materials for the participants, and then ultimately translating into community outreach and engagement. And very finally, a large part of the work over the past year has been engagement with key partners. Because this comes through the Industrial Strategy Challenge Fund, that means we're uniquely funded as a sort of collaboration between pharmaceutical, diagnostics, industries, medical research charities, as well as government money. So whilst we've started with the sort of foundational money from Innovate and UKRI through the Challenge Fund, we spent the last sort of 6 to 8 months now finalising sort of relationships with industry who are going to co-invest with us to deliver this programme. And that's been a key sort of activity for us. Hopefully we're at the point near signing all of those contracts, and then looking forward, really seeing the pilot start very early in the next sort of couple of months, moving on to the main study, hopefully by the end of this year, and then recruiting through for the next 5 years or sort of 4 to 5 years to get us up towards the 5 million target that we have for the programme. And I think with that, thank you all very much for listening and very happy to take questions.